Moving the discussion this early morning, the Media Review Network welcomes the HAWKS investigation into South Africans, including Aaron Bayhak, suspected of serving in Israel's military forces in violation of South African law. South African law, at least on paper itself, prohibits South African nationals from serving in military forces. There are certain circumstances where they may choose to do so, but generally, in principle, it is not allowed under South African law to serve in a foreign military. The probe follows years of diligent work by advocacy groups and legal experts demanding accountability and law enforcement impartiality. Well, joining us this early morning is Attorney Ziyaad Patel to unpack some of the possible cases and the current scenario into the investigation of the said individual. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Attorney Ziyaad Patel.
Wa alaikum assalam, and shukran for having me on your show. Yes, this is a culmination of many years of work, but I must say that we are still very far off from gaining any real positive momentum in our organs of state and our government in doing something that is really constructive for the Palestinian people. I have been speaking even yesterday about the serious disconnect between what South Africa's foreign policy is and its position that it has undertaken on the international stage, where it had referred the case to the International Criminal Court in November 2023 about the atrocities that were being perpetrated against the Palestinian people by the Zionist regime of Israel, as well as the International Court judgments, Court of Justice judgments in relation to seeking protectionary measures and implementary measures for the Palestinian people in the ongoing genocide. But this is a serious disconnect to what is actually going on when it comes on the domestic level. This is something that we've been busy with for many years, over a decade and more, when the first war started in Gaza in 2008-2009. And since that war, there were serious atrocities and comprehensible evidence that was submitted in terms of the Gaza docket to our National Director of Public Prosecutions and to the South African Police Services, namely the HAWKS, to investigate, and nothing positive has culminated out of that. But we have persisted and pursued. And carrying on from there, we initiated, well, my office initiated, representing certain organizations and individuals, the South African Zionist Terrorism Corridor Probe. That was done in 2022, where we identified a number of Zionist institutions, as well as South African citizens and nationals who were serving in the IDF unlawfully. We invoked national legislation such as the Regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act, the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and Terror-Related Activities, as well as other related acts like South Africa's domestication of the Rome Statute, and also the prevention of organized crime. What we've been doing as well is showing through evidence and through international law that the right of resistance can never equate to what is being Hamas and other organizations that are fighting for the right to self-determination. That can never constitute any acts of terrorism. In fact, terrorism is perpetrated by the Zionist regime in the ongoing genocide, war crimes, and so forth. If I may come and explain to you what we've done just recently on Aaron Bayhak. Last year, October 2024, we supplemented our criminal complaint with a number of additionally listed accused suspects that were serving presently in the Gaza war, and Aaron Bayhak was one of them. He was identified to be part of the IDF Paratroopers 202 and part of a ghost unit called in Hebrew Al-Refrain, uncovering through incredible journalism of Yunus Tarawi, a Palestinian journalist. The head of the unit, a certain Sergeant Daniel Raab from the U.S., was interviewed and investigated, and this is what he came up with. He said, one, there is a red line that Palestinians don't know about, and endangering in a real way is a matter of proximity. It's a matter of distance. that this is the line we define. They don't know the line, what the line is, but we know. And this is when they are doing sniping attacks and targeting civilian Palestinians. This goes forward to say, let me just go to the next. This goes forward in saying that, for instance, they suspect that shooting occurred in a short time period before the video was uploaded. Raab took a picture of the front of the Grand Mosque in Khan Yunis downtown, some 100 meters away from the hospital, the rooftop that we were standing from, and that we were geolocated surprisingly several hundred meters away, directly facing the eastern entrance of the Nasser Hospital. And this has been carrying on several days of brutal and bloody executions of civilians in Khan Yunis. For example, on 6 February, Ashraf al-Najjar, a man in his 50s, was executed in cold blood near Nasser Hospital and specifically near the Zahra School. The next day, February 7th, another execution is committed. A 16-year-old kid, Rawa Kadi, is shot in the head in front of Nasser Hospital. A precise and fatal shot. Her blood was dripping on the street in front of the hospital. That same night, 2 Palestinians are executed by Israeli snipers. Iyad Koder, a 33-year-old man. Another was a 16-year-old kid, Ahmed Abu Taima, both from Khan Yunis. So this is the activities of this particular ghost unit. Just coming back to what Daniel Raab said, he said, 2 is that the Palestinians don't know the presence of an Israeli force in the area, and 3 is that there was a procedure to open fire on anyone above the military age. Now, this is what's happening in civilian areas. The ghost unit has been targeting civilians near hospitals. This moved from South Gaza City, from the Al Tahawa neighborhood to the Al Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, and just basically targeting civilians as part of this broader regime of destroying in part or whole a civilian population. This unit had also, through Raab's evidence, testified that at least each member or team was responsible for 5 kills, and these kills represented, in usual circumstances, innocent Palestinian civilians. Even civilians that tried to save their fellow Palestinians that were shot or targeted, they were also killed. And this is the kind of behavior and immoral and reprehensible conduct that we have to continue challenging and holding to account people like Aaron Bayhak, who's a South African that goes to serve. And in serving the IDF, clearly in violation of the Regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act. To give your listeners some insight into this act, there are sections in this act that stipulates very clearly that you have to apply for either an authorization or approval. This approval has to go through the National Conventional Arms Control Committee, and this committee then has to give guidelines to the Minister of Defense or its recommendations to the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Defense can either agree or disagree with an approval or authorization for a particular individual or group of persons that want to serve in or render foreign military assistance, such as the Army of the IDF, military wing of the IDF, or in relation to any mercenary activities. Mercenary activities per se are illegal and are not allowed. But when it comes to a foreign army, you need to follow the Regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act, as well as the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and related activities.
Ziad, if I could come in there, as far as the current state of the investigation is concerned, I mean, there is this welcoming into the HAWKS investigation. Where do you see it going from here by way of the legal steps, hopefully to some sort of a prosecution or at least some sort of a reprimand upon the said individual? What should we as the public be looking out for when it comes to the next step by way of the legal process?
Yes. So this is an important question that has to be addressed. And we have to understand this these criminal complaints in the context of accountability. The first step is to gather evidence, which we have been doing over many years. And I think we've provided comprehensive and incontrovertible evidence of a number of accused suspects as well as institutions. So the HAWKS, the South African Police Services, as well as the National Director of Public Prosecutions or the National Prosecuting Authority, is in possession of this evidence that has been built up over many years. However, we're seeing that they are not persisting or wanting to push forward. Some of the stoppages or blocks that they're indicating is that evidence needs to be authenticated, especially when such evidence needs to be gathered from foreign jurisdictions, that they need to be liaising and cooperating with Israeli authorities, which of course is not going to be in the interest of the Palestinian people, because the Israeli authorities and this ultra-right nefarious regime, ethnocratic regime, is committing this genocide. There's been arguments about, the right of persisting within the legal system of Israel to gain accountability, so that those processes are exhausted before other processes can continue. However, we've got international law, we've got universal jurisdiction, and we are a party to the Rome Statute. So we can exercise this through referrals to the International Criminal Court, which South Africa has done. But there is, as I said, this disconnect, and this disconnect is certainly related to some kind of undue pressure and influence that is being imposed on these authorities to do the work as is required, as we're seeing with the International Criminal Court, because of the Zionist lobbies that operate as a mafia, operate with total impunity and utter impunity in trying to undermine these organs in doing the work that is truly necessary. We're seeing this also with the United Nations and this kind of veto that happens at the Security Council that doesn't give any effect to the protection of Palestinian civilian rights. So what can we do as the public? We have to continue to maintain our advocacy projections. We have to demand accountability on the cases that have been brought before our authorities. And what we are also in the process and pipeline of doing is instituting legal action as relief to enforce such type of orders against these organs of state and ministries that are failing to do what is supposed to be within their constitutional and legislative mandate. I don't think that we are in any way short of any legislative framework. In fact, we've got a very broad framework, and we need to have our laws read consistently with international law. In this regard, also a few years ago, I initiated what you would call the IPSRA Advocacy Citizens Bill. This was a particular bill in relation to protection of Palestinian solidarity rights. But these are blueprints for government, for civil society to utilize in demanding legislation, which I have said many years ago has to be directed against the state of Israel, particularly because what has happened over these many years and what has now culminated into a truly disastrous, catastrophic situation in Gaza and in the Middle East. For instance, Israel acts with impunity not only when it comes to the West Bank or what's going on in Gaza, but we've seen this total undermining of territorial sovereignty in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We've seen it in Lebanon. We've seen it in other Middle Eastern countries. The only country that goes and attacks nuclear facilities with utter impunity and with complete disregard of the consequences and ramifications of the environment, despite, for instance, Iranian authorities saying that it was not consistent within their jurisprudence and within the aim to go and seek atomic weapons because it goes against religious beliefs, but yet this continues. That a country goes and just targets arbitrarily nuclear facilities because there's a negotiation happening between two countries. Now, this impunity has just continued from Gaza in 2008 to what is the present situation. I've mentioned before that we can do what is within our capacity. We're not asking our government, our president, our authorities and organs of state to do that which is beyond their authority. But the legislative framework is very clear when we ratified the Rome Statute that any South African national or citizen that goes to serve and commits egregious crimes, such as war crimes, crimes against humanity, or other egregious crimes like genocide, crimes of aggression, it is considered that those crimes have been committed within the territory, and it should be investigated in terms of a constitutional court judgment. If a person
Ziyaad Patel, shukran jazakallah khairan for joining us. Ziyaad Baffa, if I could come in there with this short on time, shukran for your time and for giving us an update on the matters regarding Aaron Bayhaq, as well as the general framework that South Africa currently has. We certainly will be touching base with you, inshallah, in the days ahead to see the progress of the matter itself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Ziyaad.
Wa alaikum assalam, shukran.
Ziyaad Patel, attorney, and this is, of course, the case, the HAWKS, announcing possible investigations into the said individual for serving in the IDF.